All right, my name is Jeremy Dice. It's Jeremydys. To my left is Tim Woodcock. He's also one of the attorneys for Toni Richardson from the law firm of Eaton Peabody. Tim is Tim, and then Woodcock, Woodcock. We're working with the media still? Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah, no problem. Where's the microphone end of that? You good there? All right, just making sure they have the right end pointed towards me there. And then my client to my right here is Toni Richardson. That's ToniRichardson is the full name. I'm with First Liberty Institute. I'm senior counsel at First Liberty Institute. Let me just give you kind of a rough overview of what this case is about, and then I'm happy to turn it over to Tim for a few comments, and then I'll answer your questions. But Toni is an educational technician at Coney High School in the functional skills classroom there. And at the beginning of the school year, she had a coworker that was having sort of a rough time adjusting to the school year in that room, and happened to go to church with that same coworker, and took him aside one time when they were alone in the classroom together and told him, hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you, and then followed up the next day in the same kind of scenario where they're alone in the classroom together saying, hey, I wanted you to know that I really was praying for you last night. And some time goes by, and eventually there's a discussion, and she's brought into this and really interrogated about this conversation, asked whether or not she'd ever identified herself as a Christian on campus, or whether she had engaged in telling people that she was praying for them and things like this. And she answered the questions, but after that she receives an official memorandum from the Augusta School Department, from Coney High School itself, which there's copies over here if you don't have a copy. And in the memorandum, it tells her that she's not permitted to tell people things like, I'll pray for you, or use spiritual or religious words like blessings and goodness knows what all else. You know, as a result of that, by the way, in that meeting, it was told her that the superintendent himself had been informed of this serious allegation, and that this was communicated to her that this was a very serious issue. We got in touch pretty soon thereafter, but I tell you, this entire year, Toni has had to self-censor herself, making sure she's not using the religious language that the memorandum said if you do it again, you could face discipline and potentially even termination, dismissal from Coney High School if she were to dare to engage in religious speech again, even in a private conversation with someone that she went to church with. And so this has been a hard year for Toni. She's even had to refrain from wearing jewelry that has a cross on it, because she's worried that if someone were to overhear this private conversation or see that religious imagery on her around her neck, that she could face discipline or even be terminated. So it's been kind of rough for her. Today we have filed with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission a charge of religious discrimination and retaliation against the Augusta Schools Department. We are asking a very simple request here, that the Augusta Schools Department recognize what they did was wrong, that they tear up that memorandum that should never have been written in the first place and get rid of it from whatever place it's being stored, her file or any other file that's on campus of the Augusta Schools Department, and remind all the people within their employment at the Augusta Schools Department that no teacher should face discipline, no employee should face discipline at the Augusta Schools Department for having a private conversation using religious language. And no one should be fired from their job for daring to use religious language on campus. And I think this is going to be an important time for us to discuss with the Augusta Schools Department exactly what that looks like. I'm going to turn this over to Tim Woodcock here to my left. He's got a few other words he'd like to say as well, and then I'm happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'm Tim Woodcock. I'm an attorney with Eaton Peabody. We're very pleased to be associated with First Liberty in this litigation, and we're also very pleased and proud to be representing Toni Richardson. It is unconscionable that the Augusta School District would sanction, punish an employee for privately expressing religious sentiments. The law on this is clear. The Augusta School District, no governmental entity may discriminate against an employee for privately expressing religious sentiments. This is a case that should concern all Mainers. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tim sums it up very well. You know, if someone is going to be punished by the school district for saying privately in a conversation, I'm praying for you, that's illegal. It's against the law. No school district should be telling that. No school employee should be hiding their faith for fear of being terminated from their employment. That is certainly against the law in this country, and it's a long-standing principle. So I've outlined it for you. You've heard from Tim. Are there any questions that I could help clarify things in your mind about?
Do you find often that agencies, governmental entities, misunderstand the concept of separation of church and state?
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, the memo speaks exactly to that, where they say that this separation of church and state somehow requires teachers to hide their religious beliefs, or employees of the school district to hide their religious beliefs when they come onto campus. In fact, the Supreme Court themselves has said exactly the opposite of that. In fact, in 1964, the Supreme Court said that neither students nor teachers are required to shed their religious beliefs at the schoolhouse gates. And that's been the long-standing holding of this court. They said at that time, the long-standing for almost 60 years. So we're going on almost a century's worth of jurisprudence where the Supreme Court has said you do not have to leave your religious beliefs with you and check them at the door when you come into the school. Nor are you required to hide your religious beliefs as an employee at any environment, but especially within the school district itself. The Augusta Schools Department should have known that. And by issuing this memorandum and then further threatening her with discipline and even dismissal if she dared to speak about this kind of thing again in the future, even if it were a private conversation with another grown adult with whom she goes to church with, that was too much, and that is that was going to face discipline, that's grossly illegal.
The Augusta School Department says they have been reaching out to you and trying to work through this, and they were hoping it would not, I think. They expressed surprise that you filed a complaint this morning. To what degree have you been working with them?
Well, I can't go into all the details of the conversations we would have had, but I'll tell you this, that we were hopeful as well that we could avoid this and simply have that memorandum destroyed, removed from whatever server or email or file that is located in, whether that's her file or another one, and just have it destroyed and have them realize that teachers and especially educational technicians like Toni are not required to hide their religious beliefs when they walk through the schoolhouse door. And that has not been something that we've been able to find agreement on with the Augusta Schools Department. And so we've really been left with no other option but to ask the federal government at the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission to investigate this matter, because we're very concerned that if this is what they're telling Toni, if they're saying that she cannot exercise her religious beliefs in a private conversation with someone with whom she goes to church with, what other teachers, what other students are facing religious discrimination within the Augusta Schools Department? My hope is that the federal government investigates this and clarifies this for all teachers here, that they're reminded that they don't have to shed their religious beliefs at school.
I have two questions. Number one, the first part of this memo makes it appear as though this reprimand comes out of a discrepancy or sort of an argument, if you will,
Yeah.
between two coworkers, not necessarily because I said I would pray for you, but because there was some sort of aggressive nature.
Yeah, there was you can go on at firstliberty.org/Richardson and read the entire charge that we've sent to the EEOC, which goes into much more detail about that particulars. Suffice to say, just as in summary, there was an employee, a hard-working environment right there. And we don't want to really talk about the other employees because they're not an issue in this case, because what happens up until that point just gets them into the door, and then they push that aside, and then they start asking Toni questions about her religious beliefs that were completely unrelated to whatever the disagreement and argument had been at that point.
So was the response, I'm praying for you, in response to someone who sort of confrontation?
No, as a matter of fact, it wasn't. What was happening is that another employee was having a hard time adjusting to this position. It's a special needs classroom. It's a very demanding position, one that Toni loves to be able to work in, but it's a very difficult position on a lot of different directions. And he was new to the position, having a hard time. And so as a way to encourage him, as she does normally, she went to him privately, alone in the classroom, and said, hey, I just want you to know I'm praying for you, and said other things of an encouraging nature, but that was the central theme of it all. He thanked her, by the way, and was very grateful that he had, in fact, that she had, in fact, approached him about that.
So if that was the case, then how did this become an issue?
Well, because of that disagreement in the hard adjustment that he was having to that school district, it arose to a level where she was having some difficulties with that other employee. And again, I don't want to go too much into that detail out of respect for his own privacy, but the reality is it elevated itself to that discussion Once that investigation was kind of closed, they literally pushed it aside for a second and said, now let me ask you questions about your religious beliefs. Have you ever identified yourself as a Christian on campus here? And Tony's shocked by this. And she says, well, yeah, I guess so. And they don't stop there. They say, well, have you ever told someone or used religious language like I will pray for you, or that's a blessing, or things like that? And she says, well, for people that I know from other contexts, like outside of the school environment, I think I probably have said something to that effect. And then they proceed to say, well, I got to tell you, you're in violation of the First Amendment and the separation of church and state, so-called. And that's what resulted then in this official memo. And the person at that time says that the superintendent has asked me or I've told the superintendent about this, we're having this discussion, and we get this official memo that says, look, if you're not careful, you're going to be dismissed or disciplined further if you use this language again.
I'm sorry, it's just because all the names are redacted, so it's hard to
I understand.
keep track of who the situation was, because it said, you cited an instance where he stood over you, pointed in an aggressive tone. So is that the person that you said you were praying?
That's correct.
Okay, so because someone stood over you and was in an aggressive tone, you turned around and said, I'm praying for you. So it does.
No, it turned out it was actually before that conversation had happened. That I'm praying for you had happened. The best way I can describe it for you, and again, it's just not essential to the actual discipline that she's received here, but the best way I can describe it is that that individual is having a hard time adjusting to the environment that he was new to. Toni had some experience in that field. And so I guess maybe jealous, or I'm not sure exactly the best way to describe it, but he keyed off of her and was very upset with her adjusting to it very easily when he was having a hard time adjusting to it. That makes sense?
Okay, and that's the same person that you went to church with.
That's correct.
So the second, sorry about that.
That's all right. No, it's a tough issue.
Redacted data was hard to keep.
I understand.
The second thing is that this says it's not considered a disciplinary nature and will not be included in your personnel file.
And then the next sentence says, if you continue to do this, right, you could face discipline or even dismissal. So for them to claim, as they have in the past year, that this is not disciplinary in nature, that memo, just by clarifying it as a coaching memorandum, let's take it out entirely. Had she, let's say nothing else had happened ever, and she just simply told someone, I'm praying for you, in a private conversation between two adults on campus, there is no need ever for her to be coached about that issue. It is perfectly legal for a teacher or an employee to tell a fellow colleague that I'm praying for you. There's nothing illegal about that. There was no need for coaching. So that act alone to coach her on that issue was itself a problem. But to go further and then to say, hey, look, this is this serves you as notice that if you do this again, you could face discipline or even dismissal. There's no way to get around it. That is a clear disciplinary measure, and one that I think the EEOC will be very interested to review and investigate further.
Are you seeking any other damages besides having the memo?
That's it. Just get rid of the memo.
And Toni, are you willing to tell us how the memo affected you personally?
It certainly has made me afraid at work for what could happen. It has definitely altered my speech of what would normally be said from me.
I'm sorry, can you say that?
Sorry. I said that it has certainly affected who I am as a person, what I would normally say to somebody, particularly somebody who I know outside of work. I've been very conscientious of what comes out of my mouth that would normally come out freely, especially with someone I know.
Did the person that you interacted with, did he ever say that you were making you feel uncomfortable by?
No, actually, it didn't come up that way. I mean, later when there was some, had he said, I don't like this, please stop, she would have been the first person to say, oh yes, absolutely, I understand. It just didn't happen that way. In fact, when she said, I'm praying for you, his words were, oh, thank you very much, that means a lot to me, or something to that effect. It was clearly well received. And so it's interesting that the school district found the need to try to discipline or at least provide this coaching memorandum to Toni. There was no need for that at all. Employees, especially teachers, are entitled to be able to express their religious beliefs at work, privately with other adults. That's not a problem. There's nothing illegal about that, and yet the school district has warned her that should she do this again, you will face discipline and discharge. That's a gross exercise of their authority.
Have you all met with the school
We've had discussions. I can't go into the nature of those discussions. Obviously, you're welcome to ask them if they'd like to talk more about that. But what I can tell you is that we have felt compelled to take the next step here to file this employment action. I mean, the EEOC, as you probably know, they catalog instances of religious discrimination and retaliation for Congress across the country. And this is just one more issue that we want to make sure that they're aware of, that the law is not being faithfully executed by people like the principal of the Augusta Schools Department and all of his subordinates there who are telling educational technicians and maybe even teachers that you can't use any religious language on campus. Not even the word blessing can be used. That type of chilling effect that has been had upon Toni has been remarkable. Toni just came from school, so you see what she looks like when she goes to school, and you'll notice that she's not wearing the cross necklace that she typically does wear. She's concerned that if she were to wear that cross necklace, she could in fact face further discipline or worse, lose her job. No employee should fear the loss of their job because of their religious beliefs, ever. And that's exactly where we find ourselves here today. Teachers and technicians like Toni should not have to hide their religious beliefs on the job.
Do you fear losing your job after this? Because, I mean, here they are saying that they expect you to just have a disagreement, handle it in-house discreetly. Now that you're coming forward and speaking out, is there a fear of losing your job because you're not following that protocol?
I'll let Toni give her thoughts here in a second, but I think the two attorneys over here are saying, boy, I hope they take that kind of retaliatory action against her because it make an even better case for us that she was then fired for seeking legal advice or taking a stand and asserting her legal and constitutional rights. That would be an even more absurd employment of the law here, and certainly would make a great deal more liability against the Augusta Schools Department for daring to punish someone for seeking redress within the appropriate legal body. But I'll let Toni to tell you how it's felt and kind of what she wants to see happen from here.
Sorry. All I'm asking is for the memo to just be taken away and for my coworkers to know what their legal rights are as a citizen of our country. How it makes me feel? Nervous, scared. And I don't think that I could say it any better than what Jeremy already said.
Anything else? I know the NBC gentleman showed up late, so I want to make sure I give him enough time to. He didn't even get a chance to white balance everything, so hopefully everything's all right.
All right, I can do all that pretty fast.
You good?
I'm caught up. I mean, this is really for Toni specifically. What is it like for you to go to work now? You were talking about a little bit of that, just being nervous. Can you talk more about what it's like when you actually walk in the building and the things that go through your mind related to this?
I'm just very conscious of what I'm saying at all times, making sure that what comes out of my mouth is not a reflection of anything that has to do with my faith, which is a large part of who I am. So it's like not having a large part of me at work.
Have you, prior to this, the incident in question, have you said similar things to your colleagues in the past?
I'll let her answer in a second, but I can tell you that that's just kind of who she is. She's frustrated with her kids. She'll say something like, "Oh, God love her," right? God love them, or whatever it might be. Or someone sneezes and she's want to say, "God bless you," and she's told me recently that she doesn't say that anymore. She just doesn't say anything when anybody sneezes anymore. So it's that kind of thing, just what I might call kind of civil religious language that people use on a day-to-day basis that Toni has just had to censor herself from. And this is why, by the way, the First Amendment was put into place, to avoid this kind of thing. Citizens should not have to censor themselves in their speech, especially at work. And especially when that speech is protected religious speech that is protected not only by the First Amendment of the United States, but also by Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The law is very clear. Employees should not be punished for engaging in private conversations of a religious nature with their colleagues at work. You have anything you want to add to that, Toni?
I think you
No,
said
you
it
good?
well.
All right. All right, anything else? Any other questions? Make sure you got all you need. All right, folks, thanks very much. The press release is over here if you didn't get a copy of that. There's also the memorandum that is in question is there for your copies if you need it as well. Thanks very much.